Welcome to Home's Room. Just like Homeroom, we start off our day getting together with our homies, swapping stories, even a little kiss and tell action. This podcast contains language not suitable for younger listeners, topics about sex and mental health. Discretion is advised. Our views are our own. Let class begin. Welcome back. I got Kaitlin here. What's up, Kaitlin?
Hi, homie. How you doing?
I'm good. Today was definitely a trying of the emotional and patience day, and we're talking about something really heavy, but also like kind of like on topic for like, or I shouldn't say on topic. I don't know, but the feels are definitely here for this. And although we are both currently married, I think we have opinions about divorce, which we're talking about now. So yeah, we're going to talk about divorce. And is it a dirty word?
I love it. We talk about all kinds of dirty words. I'm super excited for us to get into this one specifically.
Yeah. So if you have not read the episode description, this episode is about divorce and, you know, kind of what that looks like and what that kind of thought process is. And I will say, from a kid who had a mom and dad get divorced like later in life, it was a really awkward, weird situation. And I will tell that story in a little bit, but I think there's so much to be said for staying in a relationship and working on it, but there's also a lot for, you know, realizing, yo, I want a divorce. So we're going to get into all that.
Let's do it. I am specifically very interested in your perspective about this topic, but then I was thinking about it when I saw it on the Google Doc, and I was like, I have friends whose parents got divorced like through middle school and high school, and then I also have close family friends whose parents like waited until the kids were out of high school and into college, and they were empty nesters and waited to get a divorce. So even though it's not something that I have firsthand experience on, I'm like an unbiased third party witness to some of these types of marriages and relationships. Definitely one that I was like, yeah, let's talk about it.
So first, the average, I guess, if you will, rate of divorce or divorces that are recorded in the United States, 630,505 is what was reported. And that's a rate of, what is it, 2.3% per 1,000 people. And I don't know if that's 1,000, like it doesn't really specify whether that's 1,000 people, like 1,000 as in 1,000 couples, or 1,000 as in like 1,000 total people. So really it's like 500 people. It didn't really specify, but that's a decline of like 16% from 2019 is what they said. And it's like one of the largest declines since like the year 2000 in divorces, which I thought was like pretty crazy, just simply because it, you know, it's like whatever. I wasn't expecting that. Also, who do you think initiates 90% of divorces, or a high amount? It says 90%, but that's kind of like the headline to get you to read the article.
For heterosexual marriages?
Yeah.
Ooh. The men.
Incorrect. Women. Women initiate more often than men on average. It's like 70%. And I thought that was really crazy because
the women are recorded as the petitioner and the men are the respondent.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I'm not surprised in the sense that like it's like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. But I was surprised that like it was like that big of a number. I figured it was like more 60-40 or like 55. Like I figured it was relatively easy, but it's like, okay. What do you think the top reason for a divorce is?
I mean, knowing what I know about my state, it's like like the official documented legal reason is like income something differences, like in,
Irreconcilable differences.
yes.
Lack of commitment is
Wait,
is the yeah, lack of commitment is 75% of respondents in long term. That is what it is. And then what's your second one? I'll give you a second option. What do you think the second most is?
irreconcilable differences?
Financial issues.
Fuck. Oh, okay.
Right? That was wild when I saw that. Like I said,
I feel that right now. I'm like, oh, damn.
this next stat made me really sad, only because I wasn't expecting to find it, but I was like, hey, it's there. Let me look at it. What do you, and I even feel like, I just feel like an asshole even asking this question.
Oh
What
God.
type of couple has the highest divorce rate? And this is specifically citing like race. What race do you think has the highest?
Oh, I'm gonna say white.
Black men and women have the highest divorce rate. 22.6 and 24.5 respectively, and then followed by Hispanic men and women having the second highest at 11.4 and 14.9 respectively. Third would be white men and white women, and it's like 10.8 and 11.4 respectively. I was not expecting that one. That one, like, it just made me feel bad, but also like,
I was
damn,
not
man.
either.
Like,
Also, personally, selfishly, I'm 0 for 3. Nobody listened to me for anything else that I say in this whole episode. My energy's off.
have you now? I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself.
Okay.
Have you heard of silent divorce?
Yes.
So
I've heard of the term. It's
I've
kind
never
of
heard
like
of it.
quiet quitting in the job,
Yeah,
like in the
yeah.
job field. It's essentially you're emotionally unattached from your partner that you got the government involved in, but without any of the
Mm-hmm.
legal red
Yeah.
tape.
A situation where a couple remains legally married but live separate lives, experiencing emotional and physical detachment without a formal separation or divorce. And like I said, that one I'd never heard of, so I thought that was interesting. This one is also slightly up your alley, but more up your alley in the sense that like you are from self-proclaimed Bible Belt, and I searched what is the Bible say about divorce, I think is what I searched. And the first thing that came up, which really bugged me because the way it says it is like it's like a loophole almost kind of deal in the way that it's written. It says the Bible generally views marriage as sacred and lasting union, but permits divorce in specific circumstances, primarily for sexual immorality, adultery, or abandonment by an unbelieving spouse. And I was like, so it's like, you don't believe what I believe, so you can get the fuck on. That's such a shitty, like, that's echo chambery kind of like that one just gave me the weirds. I didn't like it. I don't know. That one gave me the weird feels. I didn't like it.
Yeah, you give me that stat, and I am immediately drawn back to my father's funeral, where my grandfather, who was a born and raised Southern Baptist, but perhaps the most racist person that I've ever met, and I will say that with my full fucking chest, recorded on the internet forever and ever, amen. He pulled me aside multiple times at my dad's funeral and said, well, did your dad accept Jesus? Did your dad accept I said, oh no, he was, if anybody deserved to go to heaven, it was my dad. He was a wonderful, great human being, generous with his time, money, finances, all the things. And my super Southern Baptist grandfather said, well, I guess since your mom died, it's permitted by the Bible that he actually like dated other people or what. And I was like, I don't want to have this conversation with you right now at my dad's funeral. Yeah. I do not want to have,
That's fucked up.
So I love that is a statistic or like a topic of conversation for this whole larger episode, because those that are super indoctrinated into religion and into like very like zealous religious beliefs. It's very black and white in terms of marriage and divorce. Um yeah, and yes, I'm very much born and raised in the Bible Belt. I've heard many a story of women who should have and didn't because it was not accepted because of Jeebus. So,
Yeah, and that's one of those things that like my mom, I've talked about it, like she's ultra religious. So, I'm going to tell that story now, but like that getting to that point for her, I think she had to go through a lot of self-searching to decide I Jesus will forgive me if this is the wrong thing, because
yeah.
this can't go on. But like I said, my parents got divorced like way later in life, and the most like fucked up thing about them getting divorced had nothing to do with the actual divorce. It was where she served him with papers, and it was the fact that like, we don't get together. They've been separated for years prior to that, so it wasn't like they were even in the same town. So when he popped up, it was at my oldest daughter's birth. And I was just like,
And that's where
oh,
she
yeah. I was like, damn, that's so fucked up.
ugh,
And like, I just had to downplay it. Like, I didn't know that that's what it was, because like, on one hand, it's like, good for you.
you
On
had a
the other hand,
process server show up to the
no,
hospital when
no,
you're
she served him herself.
oh,
She did it herself.
well, there's
So
that.
yeah, it was like such a weird, like I just happened to go out of the room and see it happening, and I was like, what the fuck? I don't know what that was. That was weird. I'll have to check on that later, but I have a lot of emotions and things going on right
Yeah,
now
you
that
got a lot going on, homie.
that I can't process. And then I don't know if I asked my sister, or like I don't remember who I asked, like what the hell just happened? What was that? But it was like, motherfucker. And I was like,
Damn.
I guess at least I'm glad that she waited until like after everybody had come in. So like it wasn't like a, hey, here's this, now go meet your granddaughter. So it
I
was
have several follow-up questions. And you know me, I am always going to give Mama Holmes the fucking benefit of the doubt. Did you
okay.
try to serve him before and
I
it
actually
wasn't
don't know.
conducive?
I'm not sure, but
Was she
also
trying to like do things the right way, the legal process, and he like wasn't entertaining it? That you had to wait?
I have no idea. I genuinely think it was just like the timeline just worked out to be like that's when it was, and like that
Mm-hmm.
was like the easiest way to do it. Like she had just gotten the papers,
Damn.
she finished it, and then we had our kid, and you can't predict when that happens. So like he lived like 4 or 5 hours away, so it wasn't
Mm.
like, there wasn't a like easier way to do it, and it just was super convenient, I assume, to happen. But also I'm sure that it's cheaper to do it that way, so like
Well, okay, cheaper and all that, whatever, economic, whatever. Do you, which Mama Holmes, maybe you should put your fingers in your ears for this next question. Do you, as an older adult child of divorce, do you have some feelings about that being the place that happened?
only because it was like like super awkward, I guess. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't like, I will forever remember that as the time that happened, as well as the birth of my kid. I don't know about my dad, like what he feels. I've never asked him about it, but like, I mean, yes and no. Like, to me, unfortunately, now it's just like kind of a funny anecdotal story. Like, I have experienced my parents getting divorced, and this is when she did it, because it's kind of like, if I was like a young kid and like it was like a big family event and that's when it happened, it probably would have been more impactful. But like as an adult, I was like, you little motherfucker. But
That's
also like
wild.
like okay. But yeah, no, I figured you'd get a kick out of that story.
That's fucking
Hopefully
wild.
hopefully out there you guys got a kick out of that story. But as we're talking about divorce, I felt like it was like a an, a relevant, some levity to this situation, if you will. Uh
Of course.
but again, when it comes to topics like this, you have to be able to laugh a little bit at it, because otherwise like it's just dreadful and you're going to recoil and not have an open, honest conversation. And I think that that's, ultimately what we got to do here is have like the open and honest conversation about what divorce is and, what that means. And in a world where like a lot of times, and I saw this, I have a note about it too, but, people stay way longer than they should because they're
Mm-hmm.
afraid of getting divorced because it means failure, or it means God
Mm-hmm.
doesn't love you, or it means that like you got single mom, or nobody's ever going to love you or find you attractive again kind of, atmosphere feeling. And with all of those mixed up in there, you should be able to openly talk about divorce and what it is and what it means and how you view it without feeling shame.
While we're being open and transparent, my husband and I, we've been in marriage counseling for over a year at this point. I think I've openly discussed it on several prior episodes. There was seriously a point that we got married. A month after that, I got pregnant with our 3-year-old daughter. Very quickly, we moved from Denver to St. Louis area. Everything, we had all these like major life shifts after we had already been together for about 7 years. Happened very quickly. And then once we finally settled into our new house with a newborn, we're like, I remember thinking, all right, this is where our happily ever after starts. And then 6 months later, my dad dies from COVID. And the survival mode that we developed after he died was me just trying to take another breath while my project manager, construction husband, managed the entire household. And it wasn't until we both finally realized that our survival mode that we had developed was no longer serving us. This was when my second child, he's 2 now. He's probably about 6 months old at this point. We got into marriage counseling. We both were like two ships passing in the night in terms of communication. And I very vividly remember, like, I was reaching out to coworkers because I work in a field where divorce is very high percentage.
Yeah.
I was reaching out to coworkers being like, what was your experience with your divorce? How much did it cost you? Because I was like, is it really at this point, is it better for me to cut my losses or like cut my losses and price a divorce at this point, or actually put in the legwork and the labor to love and accept this next iteration of the man that I got the government involved in? Because the version of ourselves that we married are no longer the versions that we have now. To the point where I was literally Googling, should I get a divorce?
Yeah. I wonder how often that's Googled. I wish you could like, I don't know if there's a way to look up that particular stat.
Well,
Like how often is it Googled?
I've seen several things on social media where it's like, when did you know it was time to get divorced? And every time in all of those comment sections, it's when you were actually Googling, should I get a divorce? So I was like, oh, fuck. But all this to say, of course, I'm long-winded. Who's surprised? Not me. That ultimately what stopped me from ever moving forward with that path is that I had already grown up in a very fractured home. Not because my parents ever got divorced, but because my mom died when I was younger. And if there was any way that I could retain some semblance of normalcy for my children while they were growing up, that's what I was going to do. So it was a conscious choice for me to stay with my husband. And now looking back, I'm so glad that we got into marriage counseling and figured out new ways to communicate with each other, all the other things. The legwork is difficult, but I do not judge married couples. Having been there, having been that wife, that's like, Jesus fuck, I don't know how much more I can take. Google, should I get a divorce right now? I was surprised by some of the statistics that you also said earlier on, Because I feel like it's a go-to in the United States for everybody to say 50% of marriages end
Mm-hmm.
up in divorce.
Yep.
So I thought initially, I genuinely believed that that was going to be something that came out of your mouth, and it never came.
Yeah.
So
You know, I think that, you know, what you said is like the most valid experience. And I think one of the things, like, for me that always gets me, I don't want to say fired up, but like irritated about the conversation around divorce is where it's like blanket statements, like, you know,
yes,
all men do this or all women are doing this or whatever. And it's like, man, this stuff goes both ways. And if you're not going to at least accept the fact that it's going to go both ways, then, you know, you aren't being honest about like your role in a thing. And like, that's probably why your relationships are going the way they are, is because you're not being honest with yourself about your role in a thing. And, you know, that's not saying like every person that cheats, there's a, you know, you had some stake in the relationship, it took two people to create the dynamic kind of deal. Because sometimes your partner just cheats because it's part of who they are, and they don't have the impulse control, or they don't have, you know, XYZ thing to stop them from doing it, and there really was nothing that you could, you know, you could do. But also there's a lot of times where, you know, these conversations happen. If you read the comments, you know, where it's like, yeah, but like, should you have gotten married in the first place? Because you sound like you didn't understand what you were getting into.
yeah,
And, you know, that doesn't sound like where you were coming from. You know, that sounded like where you were coming from was, you know, a place of, I, I always kind of, you know, I guess talk to Courtney about it, where it's like her parents split up so early that like she didn't necessarily have like a clear cut like relationship model to know
yeah,
this thing or that thing at different ages, where it would have been impactful in her life on being a wife now, because she didn't see it. And that's not something that like I feel like you can fault a person for. So for you having struggles, especially having lost your mom at such a pivotal time, where like relationship development would have probably been like at the forefront of your little developing brain at the time,
mm-hmm.
and not having that, like, understanding now as an adult that like, damn, I'm glad that I made the decision to try and to do these things, because ultimately, like, I'm better for it. I love hearing that.
Well, really, so much of the decision making process boiled down to 2 points, 2 data points. The first was picturing myself explaining to my kids every other weekend why they couldn't see daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to do that. And then the second was, I know he's a good man. He's corn fed, like, brings home the bacon, does whatever he needs to make sure that his family's taken care of. I know inevitably, if we ever got a divorce, at some point, there was going to be another woman that he was going to bring home, and I would have to stomach and face and man up to the fact of, like, I actively chose to get a divorce, so I cannot fault him for trying to move on. And
Mm-hmm.
now there's a new female figure that my kids are being introduced to that I'm just going to have to deal with and trust that my baby daddy
Mm-hmm.
has good enough judgment to bring a worthy woman around to my children. But also, I really love my husband.
Yeah,
I really love him.
I'm gonna echo what you just said, and I
I
think that
really love him.
almost the exact same thing, where it's like, I think about, you know, some other guy trying to raise my girls, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in a situation where like I don't know what's happening or whatever. And I tell people all the time, you know, the only reason that you're like still vertical, and the only reason I'm not in, you know, an 8x10 or 8x6, whatever it would end up being,
Yep.
is because of those two girls. So
Yep.
like, I I definitely don't think I think that's the hardest part. But then, you know, again, it becomes you know, like you said, I love my wife, and I've put in enough effort and enough work in our relationship and in myself, and, you know, devoted enough energy to her, that like at this point, like, we like the oven is preheated and the fucking cake is in there. If I don't get to ice this motherfucker, I'm gonna be mad. So
You know, it's so funny that you fucking say that, Matt. I'm very mouthy on the TikTok. Follow me. We'll put a link in the episode description. I had a random faceless anonymous man on one of the TikToks that I was getting mouthy on the other day say, "Oh, your poor husband. He's going to leave you for a younger woman." And I posted a response TikTok and I was like, because my husband is not publicly on the internet. He doesn't watch any of my TikToks. He doesn't watch anything that we do. He doesn't do anything, whatever. But I still had a conversation with him. I said, "Honey, this nameless and faceless man on the internet said, poor you, that you're going to leave me for a younger woman. Is that true?" And he said, "No." I said, "Why?" He said, "I've put in too much work on this one." He really loves me. Can you tell?
Yeah.
But keep in mind, all this to say, the larger topic of this episode, I've had several close friends and real life examples that lead me to believe that my own personal conviction is that divorce is not a dirty word. So
no, you can't answer the question of the episode in the middle of the episode.
Oh, well, I know. I just wasn't sure how you wanted to use that to transition into your next point of your notes. I feel like
you wait for me to ask the question. What the hell? That was I'm going to mute your mic from this end. We're going to cut that. It's not going to be in there. And then we're just going to move on to the fact that, like, I'm asking a question now. Thank you very much. You
would think that after 2 years, I would know not to stumble over
Hey, guess what? Guess what? We're going to get a divorce after this. Thank you. So anyway.
Oh, good God.
So like one of the things that I always say, when we talk about, like, we had this conversation off air after last week's episode because we were talking about, doing this week's, and I said, I think that if you as a married person don't think about what life would be like if you were divorced or not with that person, at least every once in a while, regardless of how happy you are, it's like you can't have pleasure without pain kind of thing, because you have to put yourself in that position of like understanding, like, I could go on, or I definitely, like, I don't think I would want to deal with that. And a little bit of that, probably goes into our overthinking or our like dooms brains kind of deal. But I know I've had this conversation with Courtney so many times, and I'm sure she's tired of hearing it, but like, honestly, it's like, I've told her, I don't think I would want to get a divorce. Not because like I don't want to put in like the effort to get a divorce, but like if you wanted a divorce, whatever, fine. But if we were like separated for whatever reason, like ultimately, like I don't know that I would, like, I would probably just be single for the rest of my life, because number one, I don't want to put the effort into another relationship, but also like at that point, I don't have to worry about another human. It's just me, and like, what the fuck ever. Everything else is just incidental. I don't care.
Okay, this is a whole other subset. I've had real life conversations with my friends about this. I said, first and foremost, I don't know how I got my husband. I'm a bull in a fucking china shop. We are both Enneagram 8s. When we are vibing on the same energy, we are two brick walls meeting each other, moving forward in the same speed and velocity, or whatever the fuck whatever that smart guy said about immovable objects or whatever the fuck. When we are not on the same page, we are two brick walls meeting each other at the exact same speed. I have said to my friends, I've said to the group chat, it is recorded in the history of the group chat forever and ever. I have said, first and foremost, I have no idea how I landed my husband. 11 out of 10, he is a dime. He is a wonderful, patient, kind man. I have no idea why he decided to get the government involved with me. But also, if he croaks, I am not getting remarried.
Yeah.
The only way that I would actually entertain getting remarried is if it was a lavender marriage.
I don't know
if you've heard about that.
I have not.
A lavender marriage is when a straight or bisexual woman marries a homosexual man for the tax breaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I'm like, my husband would sit and watch trashy reality TV show with me with face masks and our red light LED therapy masks on every single night. Are you kidding me? yeah, I find it very hilarious that that's also a topic of conversation that you've had with Court, because I very much have considered that and thought about that.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it just like I like
It's so
especially
much work, Matt.
especially if we did get divorced. Like I just like I, like just being me for the sake of me, and
Hmm.
like the most negative thing I could say about marriage in general is that you are tied to another person and you
Yes.
cannot make your own decisions sometimes. Like,
Hmm.
why would I want to go back to that? Once I like, if I'm done with that, I don't. Why would I want to go back? But the flip side of this conversation, we've had some fun with this conversation. But the flip side of the sad conversation where like if you were cheated on or something like that, I think those are the situations where it's not about like laughing or getting through it, because it is hard to deal with. It is your world crumbles around you. And I
Hmm.
think that when it comes to divorce because of cheating or infidelity or something like that, I think a lot of times friends are unsure what to do, and friends are not quite sure how to like make a person like feel better. Do I talk about it? Do I not talk about it? And that's part of like divorce being a dirty word for some people. And I think for me personally, when I see friends going through divorces, I generally hate that I feel like I have to, tiptoe around. I'm not picking sides. I don't know,
Yeah.
and if I'm friends with only one of the half of the couple, like that's one thing. But like if I'm friends with both of them, it sucks. But also I think that's where, reaching out to your genuine friends who are genuine friends and making sure that that person knows that like, hey, regardless of what happened, I'm here for you, and any way that like you deem acceptable. One of my friends that just got a divorce not too long ago, we just send each other like random reels to let the other one know I'm doing all
Yeah.
right, things are fine, like you no need to be concerned. But also it gives them a way to like connect without having to like physically connect or explain anything. And I think that was to me a beautiful thing. I don't know how you feel about like reaching out to friends during a divorce, or knowing like the dirty that happened that created the dynamic, and if you've had to deal with that.
Surprisingly, I would have already guessed, knowing what I know about divorce statistics in the United States, that I would have thought that maybe I'd already have like close friends that have done that. I haven't experienced that yet. Happy question mark to report that everybody that's
Yeah.
in my like generation or like iteration of friend group, and even with my husband's friend group, they're all still happily married to their first um husbands or wives. um I don't know. I think I also have a weird perspective about divorce in general, just because I do work with a lot of cops.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you know much about law enforcement, Matt, but there's way higher rates of divorce
Yeah.
with law enforcement. Um, for example, my old team, with my old department that I worked for, there were a group of 7 detectives, and only 2 of them, including the 2 sergeants that were the bosses. No, no. Okay. Out of a total group of 9, there were 3 that were on their first marriages. 2 happily married. The third, not so much. But, out of a group of 9 adults that had been on the job for decades, they were either divorced and remarried, divorced and remarried, divorced and remarried kind of thing. I don't know. I feel like dependent on the population that you're most exposed to, also the connotation behind divorce can be a little bit different.
Yeah. I will say that I know a person that has, I think they're on, this will be their third marriage, and it's like, stop getting fucking married. Like, uh, I have a friend
Hmm.
who they're they're on their fourth marriage, but it's the second or third time to the same person, and it's
Oh
like
God.
it's wild because they just they're good for a while and they're not and they're good for a while, and
Yeah.
that's what I always come back to. I wrote down this note. I think I was driving to work the other day, while we were while I was thinking about stuff for this episode, and it was a note about communication, and I wanted, like, you have a smaller snapshot of this, so I don't know if you'll have an opinion one way or the other, but you might, I don't know. But I think that, you know, this generation, and you're the tail end of it, and I would be the leading edge of it.
Hmm.
We grew up a lot of times not seeing our, like, parents talk, and a lot of times we're like, if they were having problems, or worse, like seeing them argue or whatever it was, and not getting the good and the bad of the thing, only ever seeing like the good, or only ever seeing like the hush whispers of like whatever. And for me, I know, like, growing up, I saw my parents, good, bad, ugly, like all of it, and it informed what a relationship looks like to me, because I saw them argue, but I also saw them try and figure out a way around it. I saw them take space and time for themselves because the argument got too heated, and sometimes that might have been a lot longer than like I would have expected, or it probably needed to be. But like at the same time, I'm not them, I don't have their lived experience, I don't know. So like I understand it now as an adult, but at the time I didn't. And I just think that the generation that we have now, the reason that divorce is partially a dirty word, but also the reason that like marriage is not as common, or people are just like, I'm happy with like just being, is because like they didn't see their parents struggle. It was like,
Hmm.
oh hey, like my parents got divorced when I was like 8, so I've had, my dad's had like 6 girlfriends, and my mom's had like 2 husbands since that. Like, it's never a situation of like sticking with a relationship or any of that kind of stuff through the challenges. So it's like commonplace to throw away a relationship if you're not married, but also when you're in a marriage to like hush up the arguments. So instead of having the conversation, maybe we're internalizing it more because that's what we saw, that's what we thought was happening, but really
Yeah.
we just weren't hearing the conversations they were happening on the DL. What do you think?
Or if we just don't talk about it, we can just pretend like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist.
Yep.
So I see two ends of a very extreme spectrum. One is very much what you just described, but the other is also, I saw, like, the household that I grew up in. I saw the marriage that my parents were in, and I do not fucking want that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of educates how they move forward with, their own life, their own marriage, their own partner or teammate that they decide to get the government involved in. I have seen several examples of what you just described too. What I really love about our specific, like, generation of people is we have always lived in like unprecedented times. So all things considered,
Yeah.
like, getting married and getting a divorce, Kim, there are people that are dying.
Yeah.
Kim, there was a housing market crisis and a stock market crash in 2008. Kim, there were twin towers that fell in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. I think that you bring in our generation and our perspective of life specific to our age. Um, that already is so different or of like moving in a direction where divorce is not a dirty word, because our parents and grandparents grew up in households where like everything was so strictly defined by
Mm-hmm.
societal standards or religion. Like, divorce was always a dirty word, but also we saw the environments that our parents grew up in and our grandparents
Mm-hmm.
grew up in. We don't want that for ourselves, and we definitely don't want that for our fucking children. So I've said time and time again, our generation, if you are the black sheep of your family, wear that badge loudly and fucking proudly. Because I think just age and the natural cyclical change of the economy and like us as a country and society in general lends itself more towards a very like liberating ideal of marriage, and the fact that divorce is not inherently so much of a dirty word. Like back in the day, if you heard that so and so was getting divorced, the woman was ostracized.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was not a hag, but a shrew, maybe? Is that what she was?
Maybe, I guess. I don't know what you're going for on that
I
one.
can't remember
No,
but like an old, a
a spinster?
middle-aged, yes, spinster. Okay.
So I didn't know where you were going. I was like, that's what I thought, but
Sorry,
I don't
no.
know.
Of course, Matt has the Jeopardy language that I am is far outside my grasp now. Like a spinster,
So
and
does
it
that
was
mean we're
such
not
a
getting divorced now?
oh, sorry, my bad. You're bad, our bad. I don't know. Maybe our communication is like way
Yeah,
better.
that's just happening.
40 minutes into this episode. But like a spinster, for a young promising woman to be perceived as a spinster was just like a societal death, and was just like end all be all, my life is over. I don't know how many women my age would be like, spinster? Bet. Let's
Yeah.
do it. I'll decorate my whole fucking apartment in disco balls and call it a day.
I think that that is a good point to bring up, is, the difference between like a divorcee dad and a divorcee mom, or a divorcee, like, 30-year-old woman versus a divorcee, like 62-year-old woman kind of deal. And I think that when it comes to like the way that women are viewed after a divorce, like I think the big thing about like this means a failure, and I think it has to be taken into context. Where did you fail, or did you enjoy your life for a time and that time is just gone? Like it's not about failing, it's about moving forward, because your story is not over. That chapter may be over, but the story isn't. And I think that that's the important part, I guess, when it comes to especially like younger people getting divorced, because I have quite a few friends recently that have gotten divorced for one reason or another, and I think I want them all to know, more than anything else, like, you're still a badass person regardless, and you're still doing the best that you can, and like nobody's lived your life before, so none of your choices are like, it's not like somebody has a book that says, "Oh, this is what you should have done." You had a thought. What is your thought?
I have, yes, I did have a thought. Okay. For your friends that are divorcees, let me tell you something. I was so proud of myself when I broke the cycle of regularity and I reached out and I got medicated and I got into therapy, because that was the harder choice. Disrupting my cycle of normal, moving forward into scary, uncharted territory was the stronger choice. It is the weaker choice to continue on in the known evil, especially when you have children involved. Being where I have been in my marriage versus where I'm at now, double that with the fact of like all of the other like parental relationships and marriages and divorces that I've witnessed firsthand. I am very proud of those that made the conscious choice to embrace the scary and embrace the unknown, because they didn't want to settle for a known evil, or they didn't want to settle for meh. This does not absolutely encompass all of those who had to do it anyways because you had an unfaithful partner. That's not necessarily who I'm talking about. That fucking sucks. Jesus H, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But also for those that had like more of an amicable difference, or like you're like, my partner doesn't know me, they don't see me, I'm not the same person that they got the government involved in a decade ago. they're not making the effort to continue to love and support me, and I deserve a better partner. To embrace the scary and embrace the unknown, that is a terrifying decision and takes like such a big pair
Yeah.
to be able to do that, especially when you have children involved, that I reject wholeheartedly this ideal that like divorce is a dirty word. Because I think that those who believe that divorce is a dirty word are those who were like, very easy to accept a mediocre, shitty partner. And then that's all she wrote. That's what the rest of your life looks like until you or him croak or you or her croak. And then maybe you have a couple of years of joy before you ultimately croak because you both like endured mediocrity until, you know, you were elderly. I don't know. That's like my own personal experience is what that informs. I wholeheartedly reject the idea that divorce is a dirty word because it is.
Stop doing that. You gotta
Doing
hold.
what?
You can't tell people what the dirty word is or is not until we get to the end of the episode. Stop doing it. You're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me.
Sharks, I'm here once again apologizing for my.
Anyway,
I'm sorry, Matt. My bad.
let me hit Mark again for an edit.
It's just it's such a very brave thing to embrace uncertainty. That's all that soapbox rant was meant to illustrate. My bad. Sorry.
All right. So some advice that I gave the other day, and not necessarily advice, but like an analogy. And when you hear the analogy, you're going to assume, oh yeah, okay, of course. But let me get to the end of it. So, if you fall to the bottom of a well with another person, right, and that person breaks their leg, and only one of you gets to climb out, are you going to continue to carry that person up, or are you going to climb up the ladder and go get help and, you know, live your life essentially because you can climb out, they might not be able to, you know? And it's like, obviously, well, like, yeah, but marriage is like a two-way street, so like we both might be that person with the broken leg at the bottom of the well kind of thing, right? That's where your mind initially goes with that, but it still says the same thing, that if you are developing and growing and doing everything that you need to do and being the partner that like you need to be, then that other person that's at the bottom of the well, like maybe there's not much you can do for them because you don't have the you know, magic code to get them to be whatever it is they need to be, or maybe they're just fine, they just don't fit with you. But again, that's the first part of the analogy. The second one is, what if you're both climbing over top of each other to get to the same ladder, and you're fighting, and every time you try and get up the ladder, that person climbs over you and you both fall right back down to the well. But there's another ladder on the other side of the well, and you can both climb out and go your separate ways, and life is now peachy keen for both of you. Is it worth it to continue to sit in that well fighting over each other because you just signed some paperwork saying, yep, this is what we're doing? Or is it worth trying to, like, let me climb up my own ladder for a second and see if this is what I want? And if this is what I want and this is working, it might be scary to be like, damn, I hope they get out. I hope that it works out for them, but this is where I need to be. Should you do it, or should you continue to get, you know, climbed over or pushed back down every time you get up? What you think?
In your illustration that you just painted for us, how do children fit into it?
That's the thing, is like, ultimately, I am of thinking, if you're not happy, your kids see it. As a kid that saw it, your kids see it. Your kids know. Your kids understand something's wrong. And I, as a adult now, realize that I would stay in relationships way longer than I should have because I watched my mom go through a lot of stuff that she shouldn't have. And if I don't have at least that level of effort, then like I'm not putting in enough effort, because that is the standard of like the relationships that I saw growing up. And, as an adult now, I can process that a little bit different and understand it. But as a younger person, it was like, you know, this might be shitty, but like, if I stick with it, maybe, like this. And this might be shitty, but it's not that level of shitty. So, that's just kind of how how it goes.
How do you think that whole last point that you just made, how do you think that's going to make Mama Holmes feel?
What do you mean?
Meaning, she set the example for the amount of effort that you're supposed to be able to put into relationships. Now, into adulthood, you maybe have a different perception or understanding or connotation of what that is supposed to be like. You
Oh,
just said that when
uh,
you were younger, you put too much effort or you spent too much time into relationships that were too long. Hindsight being 2020, I was just thinking that like this would be a really interesting topic to maybe interview your mom or just like hear her thoughts about, just because she's been through it. This is not a topic that I'm proposing or anything. I was just wondering, like, generally wondering, as a mother that's done that and like been there, what your
well,
perspective, what
so
she would think about it.
not as a slight to you and what and your question of asking it that way, but like that is operating off the assumption that like we haven't had that conversation, but we have. So
Yeah.
some I don't if something, especially now in my life, if I have a realization, I talk about it with the person, especially if the other person's involved, because it's like, hey, this is a thing, and I know that this isn't what the intent was then, but this is kind of what it was. So we've had that conversation actually, and I think she realizes the damage that it did, and she is like remorseful for the fact that like I saw that because she was hoping that like I didn't see it or my sister
Yeah.
didn't see it, and she realizes the like psychological reaction that had, but also realizes that like she can speak from experience, and we understand that she's speaking from experience. So like because we've had those conversations, it's easier for us to be like, oh well, fuck, if she's saying it, then like maybe I should listen to it a little bit harder because she's been there, she's done that, she knows what it is.
Been there,
And
done that.
I
Yep.
think that again, that's kind of what the whole deal is. And you said, when it comes to kids, I think that as shitty as two Christmases are, as shitty as two Thanksgivings are, as shitty as like having to watch somebody else, interact with your kid, the better thing is at least your kid can see you be happy, as opposed to seeing you slowly die in a relationship and then going on thinking that's how it's supposed to be. And like, I'm using this as an example, it's not like reflective or indicative of anything, but it's like, you know 10 years from now, your kid's 18, getting ready to, set out into the world and start in adult relationships, and was brought up in a situation where like one partner did all of the work and the other
Mm,
partner didn't do shit and was a couch
hmm.
potato and just bitched and moaned about how stuff wasn't perfect while not actively putting in the effort. So that's what they're going to assume a relationship is, or they're going to run as far away from relationships that look like that, and most likely end up in no relationship at all, because there's no way to find either safely without being inside of it. And
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to kids being happy and things, when people say kids are resilient, I want to punch them in the throat, because it's like, shut the fuck up. But also, kids are resilient. And I think that, I know I'm happy that I had my parents together for most of my life. I'm sad that like I watched my mom as an adult now, and I wish I could have done more for her when I was younger, or told her that like, hey, you don't have to stay in this situation, because I would have, knowing what I know now. But
Yeah.
that took being an adult and reliving situations. So again, if kids are involved, sometimes it's separating is still better than watching them see you guys eat dinner alone in silence and wondering why, or seeing no emotional connection or no physical connection, or even
Or
worse,
just fighting.
I was gonna say even worse, fighting or
Hmm.
arguing and slamming doors and things. And a lot of times that's the behavior they pick up when I, as a person around tiny children all fucking day, hearing them talk and hearing them play, you can tell the kids that are kids of divorce and kids that aren't, and their parents fight just simply by the way they play with certain toys and the way that their toys interact with each other. I'm
Yeah.
just going to leave it at that. And with that, Kaitlin, do you think divorce is a dirty word? This time I won't have to edit it out. I'm actually asking. What you got?
Hell no, I don't think divorce is a dirty word. I
Good.
think embracing uncertainty is a really terrifying and brave thing that you have to have a huge set of nuts to be able to do. I also think that in today's day and age, marriage and the societal expectations behind it are so completely different than anything that our parents or grandparents ever got involved in. And I say this with my grandparents getting involved in the Southern Baptist Church and my parents getting involved in the Southern Baptist Church, because guess who got knocked up sophomore year of undergrad? My mom. They loved each other a lot. That's not really necessarily the point. But I'm just saying that we as a generation have such a different understanding of a marriage. It's not a woman submitting to a husband or necessarily so much explained or defined by a religion. It's defined by, first of all, the tax break, but also a fucking partnership. That's my teammate. That's my partner. That alone kind of changes our understanding of divorce and its connotation. Divorce back in the day used to mean that you were damned for eternity. You were going to hell. Now it just means that you didn't find your person. You had a great learning lesson along the way. You probably paid an expensive lesson. You may or may not have had children involved, but your story doesn't end with that. You have a new chapter that begins whenever you decide to embrace uncertainty and embrace the scary part of finding out a new definition of normal voluntarily. And if that's a position that you've ever been in, I'm very proud of you as somebody who has seen that firsthand time and time again.
Yeah. I also do not believe divorce is a dirty word. And I will say, I am around quite a few people that are divorced and younger than me, older by a little bit. And I can tell you that all of them are thriving and figuring out who they are as people, and not saying that they're thriving in it like they figured it out, that they're figuring it out. And they have bad days, they have good days, but they're learning, they're understanding what their new normal is, and they're continuing to go. So if you're in that situation of like, you're going through a divorce and you're about to embark on that new normal, you're not alone. There's a ton of people that are in that same boat trying to figure it out. Life's not fucking easy. Divorce isn't fucking easy. Marriages aren't fucking easy. Kids in a divorce aren't fucking easy. Houses and property and money isn't easy in a divorce, but you'll make it through. And I'm pretty sure I speak for both of us when I say you got two cheerleaders right here ready to cheer you on. Reach out. We'll help you. If you just need somebody to talk to or somebody to send you random ass reels every once in a while just to check in and make sure you're doing all right, we got you. And hopefully you got us, and you go do reviews. You go share this episode. You re-listen to it when you need to pick me up or whatever it is about feeling like, maybe divorce is a dirty word, because it isn't. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah, what he said. It's not a that's what she said segment at the end of the episode anymore. It's that's what he said. Adore you guys so much. Thank you, homies, who have hung out with us for over 2 years now, if you can believe it. Yeah. I don't know necessarily where we are on our timeline. Divorce is not a dirty word. Always in your corner. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye. The bell is about to ring. If you want to drop us a voice message or simply ask a question, you can do that by clicking the link in the show notes below. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. It helps more people find us. Theme music by Kinsey. More music available on Spotify. Remember, every day is a class. go learn something.